Anime and manga is my favorite entertainment medium. The medium of comic books and animation makes it so you can do things that you just can't get done in a live-action medium. Animation, and specifically animation styles, allows you to juxtapose the plot so often, which is just a way you can further the atmosphere in a story. So, for example, like Madoka Magica, this dark and gritty story that's juxtaposed with this children's scrapbook art style. And this just helps give an eerie feeling that they want the whole anime to encapsulate, and many other anime do a similar thing. So then why isn't anime, or animation specifically, the biggest medium on Earth? Well, a lot of anime fall into the same problem. So around 60 to 70% of animes are based off of manga, and practically any of the biggest and most popular anime you've heard of are all based off of manga. A lot of manga start off as their own one-shot manga, which is just a complete story all contained within itself, one volume. There's no continuation to the story, but oftentimes these end up turning into the full manga. So One Piece was based off of a one-shot called Wanted, and Jujutsu Kaisen is based off of Gege Akutami's one-shot number 9. Even after they break that barrier and reach the weekly serialization part, most manga get canceled around chapter 18 or 19. I bring all this up to say it's super uncertain whether or not your manga will keep serializing, which leads to a lot of anime and manga having great and gripping starts, but throughout their run they start to lose what really made them special. And this is because you can't really plan this greater story and have everything in mind, because you don't know if your story is actually even going to get picked up. And having this greater story you want to tell and having your story planned out is what will separate a masterpiece like Code Geass from something like Attack on Titan that gets kind of jumbled and convoluted towards the end. And that leads me to make this video. In this video I'm going to be going over anime that kind of lost what made them special, that lost the plot after they got a little bit into it, and that just kind of get worse after a while. So let's just hop into it. So the most popular example of an anime falling off is Death Note after episode 27. Now, if you don't know what Death Note is, tell Patrick hi for me when you're at his house. Death Note follows a gifted high schooler named Light Yagami who finds a notebook from a god of death that falls through the sky. Now, after a little bit of messing with the notebook, he figures out that he can write anybody's name in the notebook in a way that they'll die and they'll die. So he uses the notebook to become the god of the new world and get rid of all the criminals on Earth. Now, the anime turns into a game of cat and mouse between Light Yagami, our main character, and L, the world's greatest detective. Light's dad is also chief of police of the very police force that's trying to find Kira, also known as Light. So Light is actually able to use his connections to get in on this investigation to find Kira, but upon meeting L, the world's greatest detective, L is instantly convinced that Light is the guy they're looking for. So practically the entire anime is just Light trying to figure out L's real name so that he can kill the only person who truly has a chance of figuring out his identity, while the whole time L is just trying to find Light slipping up so that he can get evidence against Light to convict him as Kira. So this ends up giving us a lot of iconic moments, such as the tennis match between L and Light where they're overthinking every single little thing, or when Light's eating potato chips while writing names in the Death Note, pretending to do homework because he's being monitored, and it's just a lot of fun to watch. That is until episode 25, where Light finally beats L. And most people unanimously agree upon the fact that the show should have probably ended here. Light either should have won or gotten caught right here, and that could have been the end of it. But instead they bring in these two new characters named Nier and Mello, who were just added in to be a replacement for L, and they've known L since they were little kids and are these greater detectives than even L himself. And they just aren't able to mimic that same cat and mouse that Light and L had in the first part of the series. People don't love Death Note just because of the good writing and the mind games that they play in the show. People love Death Note because L and Light are such polar opposites, well paralleling each other perfectly. It's not just the fact that they're both smart people, it's all the interactions they have and the overthinkingness of it all. L is a genius, he's funny, he's weird, he's quirky, people love him, and you love that it never feels like Light is getting away with anything when L is around, because he's always seeing through Light's plans. So killing off one of the most beloved characters of all time and then replacing him with a cheap knockoff like Nier just didn't sit right with most people. And at the very end of Death Note, when Light is finally caught and retroactively shot multiple times in the chest and finally ends up dying on the stairs, you just can't help but feel like you wanted L to be the one to catch him. And they try to do this thing where they tie it in and say L's plan the whole time was to do everything he did and die so that Nier and Mello could come together and become a greater mind than what the single mind of L could do, but nobody was really a fan of that. In most people's mind, Death Note ends after episode 25. Everything before that is peak fiction, and everything after that kind of ruins the peak from before. But anyway, let's move on to the next entry, which is Demon Slayer. So Demon Slayer's on this list, but it's for a different reason than some of the other anime on this list, and that's because I don't think Demon Slayer has even got to its best arc yet. From 2021, when season 1 of Demon Slayer came out, through around 2023 up until the ending of season 3, you could not escape from Demon Slayer. Little kids love Demon Slayer, Japan loves Demon Slayer, America loves Demon Slayer, everybody loves Demon Slayer. It's absolutely ginormous. The Mugen Train movie is amazing. It's the largest grossing movie of all time in Japan, and even came to America in theaters and just shook the entire world up. Got so many people into anime. It's one of the greatest anime of all time. It's not one of my favorite stories of all time or one of my favorites, but you have to respect what it's done for anime. The Entertainment District arc is just 12 episodes of pure hype. I've never experienced something like that as an anime fan, where everybody just came together and was like, oh my god, this is amazing. Has some of the greatest fight scenes you've ever seen, some of the best animation in any anime ever, and it's just overall beautiful. But that brings us to season 3. Now, riding off the hype of the Entertainment District arc, the entire season being this one big battle and these fights just between these same 5 characters, you think, if I remade that exactly, I couldn't mess it up, could I? And this is exactly what Demon Slayer's author tried to do, but the season 3 for some reason just fell flat. People weren't nearly as hyped, the animation was arguably just as good, and the story was still good, so what's wrong with this season? Zenitsu and Inosuke, 2 of the very fan favorite characters, most people like them more than the actual main character, just plain out weren't in this season at all. The 2 Hashira, in my opinion, are 2 of the least interesting Hashira. They don't seem as strong as the past 2 Hashira we've got. The actual upper moons they're fighting just aren't as interesting. And like Tanjiro never feeling like he's in real danger throughout the whole season really hurt it. And while for years and years you couldn't escape from Demon Slayer, now you don't really hear as many people talk about it. Whenever people bring up anime now, that you have anime like Jujutsu Kaisen that people love, or Frieren that just has beautiful animation, and they don't talk about Demon Slayer as much. And with the upcoming Hashira training arc being short and the seasons being spaced out, Demon Slayer has just gotten talked about a whole lot less, and I think it's going to continue to do that until they finally animate the Infinity Castle arc, which will bring Demon Slayer back to its peaks. People will love Demon Slayer again, talk about Demon Slayer, and that should fix everything. So that's it for Demon Slayer, but let's move on to the next entry on this list, Attack on Titan. Alright, this will probably be the most controversial opinion on here, because you either think Attack on Titan is a perfect masterpiece with no plot holes and the most coherent story ever, or you think it was a little better when it was simpler and more of a psychological horror. Attack on Titan inarguably has some of the highest peaks of any anime I've ever seen, and maybe the best first episode of any anime I've ever watched. Season 1 is so cool when you're still scared of the Titans, when the mystery is still at its strongest and you don't know what's happening. It's this feeling that not many anime have been able to replicate, where like you're in the walls with them, you don't know what the Titans are, you don't really learn information that the main characters don't know the way you do in other anime, so you never really just focus on the bad guys unless you're seeing them through the lens of one of the characters. It has some of the greatest plot twists in any anime, Eren making his dad kill the royal family, Reiner and Berthold being the armored and the colossal titan, and even has many of the greatest episodes ever made, some of the greatest speeches. Erwin's speech is awesome, Armin versus the colossal titan is awesome. So where did it go wrong? Now, a lot of people hate this opinion, but I feel like Attack on Titan is a good example of a manga that was started without knowing where it's going. And as the plot progressed, it felt like Isayama just wanted it to become something that it kind of wasn't. It gives off this eerie, post-apocalyptic vibe for the first 2 seasons, where they're trying to get to that cellar and they're just trying to figure out what's going on, and you feel like you're there with them. It's not like a human versus human thing, and even though the main character has powers and can turn into a titan, it doesn't feel like he's overpowered. And it's like this instinctual feeling we get as humans, this fear you get because you know they're lower on the food chain than the Titans, and that's super cool. And then around season 3, which I do think is the best season, they start introducing the bloodlines and the founding Titan, and you figure out the main bad guys were just people, all the Titans are people, and that they're not even the only ones left on Earth, that there's a whole world outside that's just living normally. And bringing in these godly beings and larger plot points that just start to get so convoluted and jumbled, it's like hard to make sense of everything. Now, I'm not saying this because I don't understand Attack on Titan, but I think it was a lot better when it was playing towards like your instinctual feelings as a human. Like the feeling it gave you at the start was so insane, when later on it just gets kind of caught up and lost in the sauce of trying to be smart or be complicated. And although I'm actually a fan of the ending, a lot of people don't like that Eren's whole plan just ended up not even changing anything. everything over a long period of time. And I know people are gonna hate that one, especially since I'm just saying it's the feeling it gives you. Like, I'm not even giving you real examples. I'm just like, feelings. But I don't know. I just think it kind of loses what made it so special. And now we can move on to the final anime on this list, My Hero Academia. Now, My Hero Academia is super similar to Demon Slayer. It kind of swooped in and filled the void that, like, Naruto left in people's hearts. It started, I think, right around the time that Shippuden ended and before Boruto started. And it's so similar to Naruto. It's this underdog story of Deku who has no power in a world full of superpowers. And then he gets gifted the strongest quirk of all time, which in a lot of shows, them getting the strongest power would kind of throw me off. But the thing is, Deku has to work for his power. When he first gets his power, his body gets ripped apart when he does it. He breaks his bones and he's getting hurt, and everybody thinks that he's kind of useless because he gets so hurt every time he uses his ability. And I understand I'm an adult who's about to say this, but I think the show was at its strongest when they were still in school, when they were still training, when the world felt so big and it felt like they were trying to make their way in the superhero world. But as the show moves on and they slowly start having to deal with villains, they just kind of forget about that part of it. And then since they spend so much time away from the school, when they finally do go back and show those arcs in the school, it's just not even worth it. They do like a concert arc, and like the tests at that point just don't feel like they have any weight to them. Deku eventually masters his ability past pretty much anything else they could do with it, so they just have to give him more powers. They just gift him tons and tons of powers, which I originally liked, but then it starts to take away from the feeling of the show, this underdog that doesn't have any powers that's going to prove everybody wrong. And then he can just fly, he can move extra fast, he can sense bad things, he can make smoke screens. He literally just becomes like the god of the universe, and I understand that that needs to happen. So I've been caught up to the My Hero manga for about 2 years now, and whenever my friends ask me about it, they ask if Deku has used like 100% of One For All yet, and like the answer is yes, he has, but I'm always like, that's not really even a thing anymore. At the start of the show, you were so waiting for him to just use more percent. When he uses 100% against Muscular, and then he says One For All 1,000,000%, like that is the most hype moment in My Hero to me. Later on, it's like he doesn't even use his big smash attacks. He's just using these other quirks, and he's just one-manning the whole battle, and it's just not the same. It was cool that Deku got this ability, and it was amazing, but it was at the expense of his bones. There was this whole thing about how he's not going to be able to use his arms anymore if he keeps blowing them up, and I kind of wish they explored that more. I liked when he had to flick, like when he would flick his fingers and they'd break as an attack. All that stuff was really cool, and it was cool drawbacks to having this absolutely insane ability. And the last thing I just want to talk about here is the ensemble cast. They spend a lot of time focusing on people in the class who you just don't care about. People hate Mineta. No one really cares about Duple Arms. No one really cares about Tail Guy, Tape Boy. It's just like they spend a lot of time focusing on these characters that don't matter because they didn't spend the time to build them up earlier in the show the way they built up like a Todoroki or Bakugo. And I'm reading the manga right now, and we're in the final arc and the very final fight, and they'll cut away to like an Uraraka or like Koda or Duple Arms, and you just don't care because you want to just see the fight with the characters you care about, and that just really hurts it as well. But that's it for this video, guys. I know my opinions aren't always the best, but you know, I'm trying to get out here and make content for y'all, and I appreciate anybody who made it this far in the video. Peace out, guys.